Helldivers 2 has taken over the internet. It hit 400,000 concurrent players in a game that is meant to be a sequel to a game that maxed out in its 9 years of existence at 6,000 on Steam. From the game itself just being fun to play, the gameplay loop being addictive and enjoyable, through to the goofy tone and community-driven feelings, it's all done really well. A year and a half ago, I asked the question, is gaming dying or are we entering a new age? A video that caused a lot of conversation in the comments around that idea, and I believe the last year in gaming, and Helldivers 2 in particular, has proven that we have entered a new time in gaming. Today I wanted to spend some time talking about the state of modern shooters and how they play a role in this game's come up, and then Helldivers 2, why it's so fun and what exactly it does well, and also some of its shortcomings and possible future. So let's talk about Helldivers 2. Is it going to become a staple in the gaming industry, or could it become another PUBG? So grab a cup of tea, sit down and join me in discussing Helldivers 2 and why it is so amazing. Just before we do get into that, if you wouldn't mind hitting the subscribe button if you like content like this, talking about games and topics within the gaming space. And if you do enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to come join the Discord as well, a place to just chat with others about various different topics. But also we have the monthly game club this month, which surprisingly enough, before I started scripting this video, is actually Helldivers 2. That is the one that was voted in by you guys. So if you do want to join in, come join us. Make sure to do so down below. Lastly though, if you do want to join the Patreon, you can join for $1 a month in just supporting the channel, but if you want early access to videos like this, the second channel content, and more, then make sure to check out the Exiled Ones tier. Anyway, let's talk about the state of modern games and how it's played a role in the success of Helldivers 2. For us to understand a lot of why Helldivers 2 has become as big as it has, we need to first discuss that first idea that I mentioned a while ago when I was asking the question around is gaming dying. I spoke about many aspects of the gaming industry within those videos, and I believe that Helldivers 2 is an amazing game in itself, but it has also become massive due to the amount of people craving something that focuses on good gameplay and is simply a bit of fun. It's somehow a live service game that doesn't feel as if its main purpose is to extract as much money from you as humanly possible. I'm going to talk about shooters as a genre very soon in its own separate video, but for a basic overview, we need to talk about the AAA gaming space for shooters in the last 5 years. What games in particular for you stand out the most? For many, I would probably say games like Fortnite, Modern Warfare 2019, Valorant, CS, and Destiny 2 are probably the big contenders up there for the last 5 years. There are obviously many other games in this genre that were released, but these games are some of the biggest hitters in the genre for many years after their release. All of them share big issues that are major focuses of the AAA gaming industry, which is money first and quality games second. They push you to spend your money on microtransactions by trying to tempt you in by showing you what you've missed out on when you've leveled up, and when you get round to buying those things, let's say like Valorant, they're outrageously expensive skins. Every time we load up the game, we'll end up being told about the new storefront items and the newest deal on V-Bucks, very rarely though about anything to do with the core reason that people are coming to the game, which is the gameplay. The monetary side of gaming isn't the only reason why this issue has become as big of an issue within the AAA gaming space. You also have the fact that people genuinely don't enjoy playing games that are constantly competitive. Over the years, gaming has become more and more competitive. If you load up a Call of Duty lobby a decade ago, sure, you might have a couple sweats on each team, some doing 720 no-scopes or just dominating the match, but now it's simply every single player in the game is trying to be a pro player. Everyone wants to be the best, they want to become as good as the pros so that they could go pro one day or become a full-time content creator. This is something that is closely related to this idea that I don't know which dev said this, but you can always double check me on this, but it's this idea that left unchecked, players will optimize the fun out of the game they are playing, which is incredibly true with most games that you see and that you've probably played. You always have that one friend who wants to rush everything within a couple of weeks. They then just drop the game out of nowhere because they are bored of it. Or you're just up against another player in PvP mode who on day one somehow has the best gear in the entire game. It's something that focuses on the elements of being the best possible player that you can be over having sustainable enjoyment of playing the game over a longer period of time. We rarely see much of a difference in terms of the jumps between what shooters can offer and differentiate themselves between one another. The perfect example example of this is the most recent Modern Warfare trilogy. They rarely change anything up, and when they do, they always seem to completely screw up whatever was working in the first place. For example, 2019 Modern Warfare was pretty great outside of the cheating issues and some gameplay mechanics being annoying for some players. They chose to mess around with the old school gunplay within the second title, which isn't an awful thing, but it's also not great if you want to progress the franchise. Within 3 though, they brought back that same feeling of movement that you got within the first game, but almost every single map was absolutely trash on launch. The overall feeling though of the game and the way it looks and feels to the player never really changed. You could easily pop all of them up side by side, and probably most players won't notice the difference right off the bat unless they have played the games directly. And as mentioned with other games having the fun sucked out of them, this is a great example of this as well. Whenever you jump into a game of Call of Duty or Halo, it never feels like you're having an overall great time or a fun time unless you are playing with a load of your friends and just enjoying that process. Because typically, you'll enter into a lobby who somehow you're up against a teammate who has 1,000 hours on a game that's only been out for 2 months. The focus on a game being fun to play has been stripped away for many of these shooters, as they have catered for more of the players who are either streamers or content creators, or simply put, pro players or wanting to go pro players. They only focus on the ones who have nothing else to do with their time than play those games on repeat. Due to this, the elements of games being a game to be enjoyed has been stripped away in favour of competitive play. That focus has meant that there's been a massive craving in the gaming space for something that is simply fun. They could be something simplistic like Among Us, or something far more ambitious like Baldur's Gate 3, but what we do know is that they need to be focused on a fundamental thing, which is the game being good first and foremost. With many games being released either unfinished or bug-ridden on the first day of launch, you're probably expecting me to completely rip into this game because there was those exact issues, and I'm going to mention them later on in the video and bring up points of how they're still affected now, but this game does have a genuine excuse. First of all, it wasn't a AAA release. It's not like it had tons and tons of money backing it, and they weren't expecting a massive player count like Kill the Justice League. It's a game that had an unpopular predecessor who made the right moves to make a game that is fun, but underestimated just how fun it was to play. I mentioned this on the second channel, which if you didn't know, I do have a second channel, make sure to go check it out. I just post random stuff about games, maybe just random highlights of me playing a game or me discussing one. For example, I need to release my Skyrim video at some point soon, but make sure to go check it out if you want more other random content related to games from me. But the reason why I mention it is that on that channel, I made a video when Helldivers 2 first came out, which was talking about how I only found out about this game originally because of Instagram Reels. I didn't see any of the content about it until then, and if I'm honest, I thought it was something related to Star Wars initially. It's one of those games that came out at the perfect time, at the perfect price point, and also hit their target audience perfectly. It's a franchise that the majority of players who are playing right now had never heard of up until then. What I mean by this game came out at the perfect time is that nothing in a long time has given me the same feeling as just playing with my friends when playing something like Destiny 1 in the first year, or many other releases before that. It's been so long, and it's definitely a nice feeling to be able to just jump on and have fun and play a game. The game though does focus on that element in particular, the fun aspect. Every part of this game is designed from the ground up to be a game, and one that is fun. That might sound weird, but when you consider that most games coming out are either masterpieces that are 50% movie and 50% game, or something that takes every single ounce of money from you as possible, means that this is a pretty rare thing to see, especially in gaming right now. So let's talk about those. I wanted to talk about the reasons for this feeling, so let's first start off with the gameplay. This game does something next level with its movement. It's a mixture of not normal and keeping the fundamentals correct. And I'm just adding this in here outside of the script because I remember seeing a video talking about this, and I think that it perfectly describes this, is that the movement in this game is incredibly similar to Metal Gear 5, and ever since I've heard that and I saw it, I can't unsee it, and it's very true, and I think that's why it works so well within this game. And what I mean by this is that the game feels really nice to move around in, and the diving mechanics are quirky, but they're still fun. The movement is incredibly fluid for the most part, and I personally love many aspects of it, but there is two bits that do annoy me just a little bit. The first one of which is that when you're running around in this game, you can't just, toggle run for some reason. There isn't a feature for that, which is kind of an annoyance pretty easily if you understand what I mean by holding down an entire key for a 15-minute sprint most of the time. It's not particularly fun. So I'd love a toggle run in some form of this game. I've been playing this game for 15 50 hours now, and roughly 30 hours of that is apparently actually inside of missions, which is insane to think. That means that 20 hours of my 50-hour sessions were pretty much loading screens or sitting around and waiting to get into a lobby. So that means that within 30 hours of playing the actual game properly means that I've been sprinting and holding down that key for quite a long time. Becomes pretty, annoying after a while. So yeah, a toggle sprint would be absolutely lovely. The other big one for me is that if you try to actually sprint right after diving, your character doesn't get up. It's really stupid. The reason that this is important, in my opinion, is that you can be getting chased by 20 bugs or automatons, and they're right behind you, and you dive to try and get out of the way of some form of spray. You then have to hit the crouch button or hit the prone button to even start getting up to move again, instead of just hitting sprint, where the character can just auto-animate out of it. A lot of games do this already, and I don't understand why it's not in this game, considering diving is a big feature of the game. It can end up making the movement at times infuriating, as the game feels really great and has ragdoll mechanics at the end, which can also add to that fun element, but overall, running around and having to deal with the fact that if you dive, you now have to mess around instead of just being able to hit shift right off the bat and get out of there, especially when it's sticky situations. This game focuses on feeling fun over the idea of being an amazing shooter experience, which for some reason a lot of AAA shooters seem to care about. They like being the best gunplay mechanics instead of just being a fun game. You have a decent variety of guns in this game, but if I'm honest, this is probably one of the weaker points of the game as a whole. Yes, the gunplay does feel great, but once you've gone across the basic breaker shotgun and SMG pistol and the railgun, you have zero reason to care about anything else. Nothing really matters. Now, just to preface this, as this is outside of the script now, this was scripted, this part of the video anyway, before the update came out. So now that has kind of changed a bit, so I am going to change up some parts of this to mention other aspects. Obviously, what I've just mentioned, things like the breaker shotgun has been nerfed, the SMG pistol is still good. I'm going to be talking about the railgun and things like the actual backpack very soon, as this is a bigger element, which yes, I know I've just said that it kind of gives you zero reason to use other weapons, but I don't always think that sacrificing necessarily like the progression of the game for the sake of weapon variety is always the key thing to do, especially in a PvE game. In the early game though, you do get access to really fun weapons to use. For example, the LMG, especially at the early gates, is really fun to use. It always made me feel absolutely great. You could just take on hordes of enemies, swiping across your screen, hoping to kill as many as possible, or you can just use and kill the biggest enemies with the sniper. The railgun though is still one of the best weapons in the entire game, and when it first released was probably the best weapon you could possibly be using across the board, and it made the later game really fun because it was an actual gun that felt like you had progressed to the point that you deserved using it. But with progression, I do think we need to talk about gaining access to stratagems, as the two main reasons to show you any form of progression within this game is through stratagems and just your level. With the stratagems, you do have a few different areas. For example, you've got the Patriotic Administration, which is just the likes of machine guns, autocannons, and the railgun. All of these are something that you're probably going to want to use at some point and just test out to see how you like them, but for the most part, you only want to have one of these at a time. It allows you to deal extra damage to many different enemies and tear through armor for a lot of them. Another is the orbitals and hangar stratagems, which is everyone's best friend when it comes to this game. You get so much of what truly makes this experience what it is through these two specific sections: the bombs you can drop, the airstrikes, and orbital lasers. Everything within this area is incredibly fun, however it is definitely a tad overpowered at times. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, if it's not already happened just yet, that these things will get a little bit of a nerf, as they definitely were on launch pretty OP for taking on entire areas single-handedly. You then have things like the robotics workshop, which gives you access to plenty of things that are absolutely superb against the automatons and do great jobs in killing them when you're doing the missions where it's just to kill those by themselves. However, since the most recent update, that has definitely become a different story. And then we also have, just to finish off this little bit about stratagems, the engineering bay and bridge stratagems. My personal loadout prior to making this script was using the railgun, shield backpack, orbital laser, and 500 kg bomb. that was personally what I enjoyed. I didn't actually realise that that is what pretty much everyone was using for the most part. I can understand why certain things were nerfed. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And I do think that things like the shield backpack though are incredibly crucial for higher level difficulties. And I can definitely see why you might become a bit too dependent on all of it. However, again, I don't necessarily think nerfing everything was the right answer for that. Fundamentally, what this entire loadout did for many players, not only was it easier for the game's experience, making it less of a challenge to get through everything, it was the case that you actually felt like quite a bit of a badass and just were able to barrage and artillery fire every single enemy at your fingertips. Another aspect that makes this game something special is the soundtrack and comments from the NPCs. For one, the music in this game is absolutely amazing. It never gets old and it always sounds amazing each time you boot up into the next game. It's one of the few games that I find myself not wanting to listen to music or watch YouTube videos whilst I'm playing, which is actually really great to experience. I haven't had that for a long time outside of like first time playthroughs of the likes of Red Dead 2 and whatnot. However, some of the most amusing parts of this game definitely comes from the comments that you'll get from random NPCs in this game and the tips and tricks that you get whilst waiting for a game to load. It adds to the wacky experience of the game and in general the fun aspects of it, and it is able to portray to everyone that it is completely a joyful experience when playing. However, even with all of that and much more good things about this game, I wanted to spend some time talking about some of its pitfalls and issues. I want to spend some of the last parts of this video talking about the anti-cheat, the issues that I find with the game itself, and the future of this game's existence. Starting with the anti-cheat, which, before anyone tells me that every other anti-cheat runs at the kernel level, I know, and I also don't care. In most cases of anti-cheat, it's being used in games where, when you are cheating, all that's happening is that you're getting an advantage on another player, therefore making the game worse for everyone else involved. In this game, it does feel a tad invasive to have an anti-cheat when the only time you're even going to be fighting another player is if you go out of your way to kill one of them and they decide to kill you too. Outside of that, there's no real issue because let's say someone joins your lobby and decides to kill everyone in that lobby, you can just boot them from the lobby anyway. It doesn't really make a difference. I can definitely see why it's the norm in gaming, and it makes sense as a lot of cheating software does run at the kernel level as well. However, when it comes to it, I do think it's a little bit of an overreach and a tad invasive for a game that isn't PvP. One good thing about the anti-cheat though that I do want to say is that when you do uninstall the game, it uninstalls the anti-cheat with it, which isn't an actual normal practice for many of the big companies in this space that exist on PC. Now, with that slight positive out the way, I do want to mention one last negative, which is ever since the most recent update of this game, this anti-cheat seems to be using up more of my CPU usage. Let me know obviously if it's something that's happening for you, because it could just be something that's happening for me. I have an i9 13900K that is also overclocked, so I shouldn't really be having any issue. Prior to the update, I was using up maybe 8 to 9% on just the anti-cheat alone, and now it can hit highs of 25%, which has me questioning what is it actually doing and screwing around with to affect my performance so heavily. Let's talk about some areas of the game that I believe need to be sorted out or need to have slight tweaks to it because they're personal issues that I have with it, which is only a few as generally the game is really good. However, I would be lying if I said that it didn't have issues either around the choices that were made by the devs or issues raised by plenty other players out there. The first one that I wanted to talk about is around making guns pretty much useless and issues around the progression system. When I first started scripting this video, it was around the first month of this game's release, and due to that I was loving my time with the likes of the railgun and shield backpack, as both felt like necessary tools to take on the impossible and Helldiver difficulties. Both items are unlocked by the maximum stratagem rank at the time, which was level 20, which has now been raised to level 25, which is only bringing you one set of mechs. So both of these things are meant to be top level items that you can get through the progression system for both protection and weaponry, with both still technically being the best possible gear on paper that you're meant to be able to unlock from these things when it comes to a level rank. However, both now feel really weak and useless. With the railgun, for example, it just doesn't feel as fun anymore. It doesn't feel as if I can take on things. Sure, it was pretty overpowered and gave zero reason to use anything else. However, the shield backpack for me is more of the bigger issue in this thing. The reason this is an issue for me and many players out there is that it does make those harder difficulties playable when that backpack was really good. However, now that it isn't, it pretty much makes them almost unplayable for many and simply just not that fun. Before people talk about how they can get along with with these harder difficulties without the shield backpack, good for you, but I'm not talking about you in particular. This is an issue that I mentioned within the video about the state of multiplayer games. People like playing games that at the very least, they are competent within. Typically a new Souls player who isn't great with those systems probably won't be having that much of a fun time playing the game, as it's extremely hard in comparison to other games out there. The fun from it comes from overcoming and becoming more competent at the game. That works in a game that is primarily focused around that exact thing, the combat system, and how players need to learn it. Within this game though, it feels as if they just want people to get wound up and die repeatedly. Sure, I'm aware and tell people when they start playing the game that you're meant to die a lot within it. However, when you've sunk a lot of time, learned a lot about the game and how to play it, became involved in the progression system of Helldivers 2, which is that you level up, get better gear so that it's slightly easier, so that you can then progress to get better gear that makes the process slightly easier. To have all of that then ripped out from under you is pretty unsettling for the progression of this game and the future of this game, and more in particular, the enjoyment aspect of the game in the long run. Some might say that this will get rid of metas within a game, but first of all, people act like there won't just be other metas that people will go to instantly, but secondly, that all metas are bad. I can understand if you're playing Destiny in year 1 when you're being 2-shot by a thorn and bleeding out, or the Mida multi-tool is casually 3-hit headshotting you with 0 recoil, and being annoyed at those things and wanting those things nerfed. As again, it's ruining the experience for other players, which outside of something like an exotic quest within Destiny is completely based on RNG to give another player complete advantages. In this game though, it's a PvE game. They are meant to be effectively the max level weapons within the game. Now it doesn't feel as if either belong in that category of being the max level weapons, which again, I must say, makes me worried about the progression system of this game. Another big reason why this feels as bad as it does as well is that we're also hiding away from the fact that they increased the enemy amounts on many of these harder difficulties. The reason why the likes of the railgun and the shield backpack feel so much worse now isn't just because both of them got nerfed, it's because they both got nerfed and then the enemy amount pretty much doubled on most maps. That is another big issue. Surely they could have just trialed it with doubling the enemies first and seeing how the player base deals with it. Sure, they'll probably still use the railgun, still use the shield backpack, but that again takes into the viewpoint that all metas are bad and that having a maxed level weapon that is a part of the progression system is a bad thing. And why wouldn't people use the thing that is the max level weapon? To me, it just seems really out of place. It's a system in which is being viewed from the perspective of making everything useful at the same time, which sure opens you up to options of being able to play the game in whatever way you want it, but it also removes the reason to really care about anything in the first place about your progression within the game, when the entire gameplay loop hinges on this idea of getting rewarded by cooler stuff that you can use to make the thing a little bit easier for yourself when you level up, and then get even more cooler stuff, and so on. It all hinges on that gameplay loop. But now they're just going, you know what, we're just gonna, take that back now. Go use that thing you unlocked at level 12 because now that thing is pretty much the best gun in the game. Now that my dislike towards the nerfing of the shield backpack has been unleashed, we can move on to the next thing. But I am prepared for all of the comments that are gonna say something along the lines of that if you needed the shield backpack, then you didn't deserve it type of comments. We need to talk about the game crashes though and matchmaking issues, as they still are around.
Oh god, I don't even want to think about that.
Oh, my game crashed.
You're joking.
Love it. From things like the game outright crashing, which happens less now, but it's still happening enough that it's irritating. For example, you can end up wasting 35 minutes of your life to then be kicked out to your ship, or the game outright crashing on you, and then you've lost 30 minutes of your life, literally to nothing. I know I'm playing a game, and by definition, I'm probably wasting my time. However, at least give me my rare samples if I'm going to end up being booted out to the lobby. At least give me that. I have two reasons why this in particular is really infuriating. The first of which is that it just pulls you out of the game experience. It completely gets ruined and it boots you back to your ship and you have to relaunch back in as you're stuck on a loading screen, for example. The other thing for me, and it brings me into that final issue about this game, which is where the priority is set for the devs when fixing these issues. When the game got its first proper update, They focused a lot of their resources and a lot of the patch notes on fixing item issues in the item shop, which does annoy me a little bit when you have a game that doesn't all the time have servers working properly, has random glitches where you're just killed for zero reason or you get stuck in a rock or wall. With just those issues alone, you could argue that it's dumb to focus on the item shop, especially when all of that can be done at a later date, considering the game really doesn't focus on pushing players to shop from the item shop. It's just something that you can do on the side. You can gain the currency in-game and through their free version of a battle pass. So there is zero reason to be focusing on fixing an item shop when most of the player base don't really care about using it that much. The future of this game is definitely going to be an interesting one. A take that I heard recently and I kind of wanted to mention and just hear some thoughts on is that this game could be the PUBG of this style of game. The one that truly innovates on the idea of what this genre is, but will be forgotten for newer, more exciting and more recognizable franchises that make games within this exact niche to take a slice out of the pie of this game's success. We all know the likes of Disney and Xbox are eyeing up this game since it started exploding. It's perfect for games like Halo or even a franchise like Star Wars. You could even do this exact same thing in different ways that aren't just sci-fi related. And I kind of agree with this idea, however I'm not really sure, only time will tell whether or not that is a good take generally. This game though definitely does have a bright future, at least for the next probably 6 months to a year. It's fun to play and it's a great experience with friends and really reignites that feeling of late night sessions on the Xbox 360. But it does also worry me in other aspects, such as the progression system of this game, as I've mentioned recently. Trying to make everything as good as one another in the fear that metas will exist in their game to only become more stale in the long run when you don't really have that thing to progress towards. The worst case scenario is that you're going to have new gear drop every update or so, they're going to then become the most overpowered thing, people will just rush to get that will then get nerfed, a playstyle now doesn't exist. All in all, I don't really have many predictions for this game's future, as it would be nice to have a game within this genre that isn't ramming microtransactions down your throat at every single moment, but it still has a lot of benefits from being a live service game, so it's kind of a win-win scenario right now. But I also can't guarantee that something else won't just come along and build off this game's success, or simply that the developers could just find themselves alienating the player base by choices in balancing practices. I'm still having fun with this game, maybe not as much as I was prior to this nerf, but I am still enjoying my time. Even though the railgun and shield backpack aren't as powerful as they once were, I'm still using the shield backpack, so I can't really complain, and on top of that I've just swapped it out for the laser thing. I've kind of forgotten what you call it, but yeah, for now it just means that I'm not being able to use the railgun and have as much fun with it. I'm definitely interested in seeing where this game goes in the future though. And as the title of this video does discuss, and this will be slightly off script, so sorry if this is more rambly, but it is the case that this game stands for a lot of things that is just against the idea of what we've been getting over the last few years in this sort of space, the online shooter world. Instead of it being a game that solely focuses on the idea of extracting all of their money and targeting audiences that fundamentally don't care about what they're putting in the game, they're instead focusing on selling to a target audience that clearly wants a game like this. This is why this game has exploded as much as it has done. For everything that has been going wrong in the gaming world when it comes to this sort of thing, we've been given a lot of great things due to this game in particular. So again, it is really interesting and I can't wait to see kind of where they go with this in the future and where other franchises come into play, because you definitely know at least one of the big franchises, probably going to be Xbox, most likely, are going to be looking at this in a way of trying to figure out how they can get their corner of the market if Helldivers 2 isn't going to be going to the platform. But for now, that's it. I wanted to end off this video by just mentioning a few things. First of all, thank you for the support, specifically over on Discord, about the changeover in terms of what I've recently uploaded on the second channel, talking about the direction of this channel and other things when it comes to my life. And as I mentioned, the Discord, make sure to go check that out, and the second channel, both will be linked down below, where I talk about a few different things, but in the Discord, join us in just chatting about many different parts. In particular, when it comes to this channel, as I mentioned within the second channel video, I'm no longer uploading every other week, I'm uploading uploading every 3 weeks and focusing more on my self-improvement channel and doing things in that area, documenting my life and just having chats more with you guys through that sort of way. So yeah, if you find that interesting, make sure to go check it out and you can see me slowly progress, hopefully, who knows. Lastly though, I do want to thank my Patreon members, as the 3 of you who are Patreon members have been really great support for the channel so far. It's been amazing just talking to you guys. You've been really great in terms of just having casual conversations back and forth. You're pleasant enough people and I enjoy just having the chats with you guys as well, and the input that you guys give me for everything in general. It always feels really great, so I'm absolutely thankful for that. With that all being said though, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and do subscribe for more content in the future, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.